So, hello everyone. Okay, so stream is just getting started, making sure everything is live and up and running. So we do have our live stream. Hello everyone. Okay, so everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's been a long time. So and in this video, I'm basically going to show you how you can build a modern day blogging application using Laravel 12. We'll be using React, which comes with Laravel 12 starter kit. We'll be using Postgres for database, and as well we'll be using the Filament admin panel for things about our admin panels. We use it to generate the tables and the forms and everything that we'll be needing for our blogging application. I'll be walking you through everything you need to do, how you can get started, what you need to do to get started, and how you can basically build this application from scratch. Currently, I've not done any planning on this, so this is going to be a very real live tutorial. Okay, it's a live stream. It's going to be very 100% real. No fakes, no planned. You might see me get into errors and issues, which we'll try to fix together, and this might also be a part series. So if I'm not able to complete it today, maybe because of a power outage or probably maybe something came up, I'm going to make a part 2 of this same thing and then also post it on the channel. Right after this, I'm simply going to do some cutout and then do some trimming just to make sure that every of the things and every of the videos you watch are 100% up and running, so that you can actually get the thing you are here for. So let's get started. Now, the first thing we simply want to do while creating this project is to create a folder, obviously. So we're going to start by creating a folder, and I'm going to put this folder here on my desktop. I'm going to generate a new folder. We'll call this the blog app React and Laravel. So basically no name for now, but as time goes on, we're basically going to generate the name for this blogging application. Now, going on, we simply want to open up this in the terminal, and I use a Linux machine, but it's still going to be the same thing if you do use a Windows system or pretty much any of those. It's just the same thing, guys. So in this of Laravel right here, we can see that we have the app in the terminal, and we can get started by installing Laravel. Now on your browser, you can simply search for Laravel, and the first link it shows up would obviously be the Laravel framework application. And inside of this, you can see that we do have some things to get started with. The first thing we need is to do this compose global require Laravel installer, which I have already done. And once you copy that, you see you need to do Laravel new app. See, so you put in the name of the app you want to build right in there. So that is basically what you want to do. And for me, back here in the terminal, I can simply say Laravel and say new, and within this I simply want to put the name of the app. In this place, I simply want to use blog as the name of the app. So if I hit the enter key, you can see that it brings up this option. Would you like to use a starter kit? Yes, obviously we'll be using the React starter kits that comes with Laravel. So we hit React, and we'll be using Laravel's inbuilt authentication also. So we'd use that. We'd use Pest for our testing, and after that you'd see that Composer starts to download and install some packages. Although if you do see most things like this, it simply means that Composer is a little bit deprecated. You just need to update it. That won't give us an issue, but as you can see, we're downloading the Laravel starter kit and we are installing the Laravel starter kit. So while it's loading all the things and everything, we're simply going to give this blogging application some structure. And I'm going to simply do the structure using something called Excalidraw. If you don't know what Excalidraw is, it's basically like a platform where you can do some things. So I think I made a mistake in the spelling right here. It's called Excalidraw, like that. And it's a place where I'm sure you might have seen something like this from some of your popular web developers and other people who use this to draw things. So basically this is what we're going to use. Now for this, we'll be using Laravel. As we've already seen, we'll be using Laravel for our templates and for every other thing in respect to the backend, and also things about the authentication backend, the framework and everything is always going to be Laravel. And for those who don't know, Laravel is based on PHP, and to get started you need to make sure that you have PHP installed, and as well you need to make sure you have Composer installed. Now, if you don't know how to do this, a quick search on Google would show you how to do this. And also, if you want a special video of how to install and configure Composer, I can simply show you how to do that. So once you have that installed, we'll be using Laravel paired with a framework like React, because Laravel does have React within it in its new Laravel 12. So we'll be using React for the front end. And when we do that, we'll be using a special section for the back end. So for the back end of the application, we'll be using something like FilamentPHP. And for those who don't know FilamentPHP, FilamentPHP is basically an admin application. So it's used for creating things like dashboards and dashboard templates. So we'll be using FilamentPHP to create that. And also within all of this, we'll be using Tailwind CSS for most of the styling. And this would surely be within this FilamentPHP area to the React area. We'll be using Tailwind CSS for most of the styling. So we'll use Tailwind CSS. Now, since we have all of this settled and we know what we're going on next, the next thing we need to do is to make sure that we are on the right track. So back here in the terminal, you can see that we are generating auto-load files. And once that is generated, it's basically going to ask you, do you like to run npm install, which you can hit yes for. And this is basically going to bundle all of the necessary dependencies and also run and bundle, I think, the CSS for the Laravel, because Laravel 12 automatically uses Tailwind CSS also for things like the front end and some of the other components within Laravel 12. So it's basically going to download that, use it to compile the CSS, and give us a version where we can just launch and see the initial boilerplate. So now, moving on, we can see that it's loading well. It's going to take some time, obviously. So while it's doing its work right here, we can simply come back to define some of the things that we need right here. So within this, we are basically going to do some things called schemas and relationship, which I'm going to talk about. That is going to be part of our back end. So for this, we simply want to talk about some things called schemas. Now, in Laravel, schemas are basically tables within your database that you can use to work with data. Okay, so take a schema like a table, because essentially it's a table. So what are the tables that we are going to need in our Laravel application? So Laravel by default provides the user schema, which is one thing that it provides. But also we're going to create some other schemas to work along with our blog. Now this is going to be a simple blog that covers most things, so you're still going to get the same information and still going to have the same kind of usefulness like you'd see on a WordPress blog, but we're simply going to keep it as basic as possible in the aspect of where there will be no themes, so you can't install a custom theme. So what you have is just what you have, nothing like themes or anything. So within this, we'll simply have something called a blog category, which is going to be part of it. We'll have something called a blog tag, so you can tag blogs based on what they have. And then also we'll be having the main blog. So after this, we'll have the blog table, and then we have the users blog category blog and this. And also we'll be having some other schemas like the comments. So whenever anybody drops a comment, it's going to be tied to a particular blog. And then also would have a different comment, or sorry, a different schema for something else. I'm going to call that the images, okay, because for this you don't want to put the images alongside the blog. So we'll basically add a new schema called blog images, which will be holding all of our images. So those are all the schemas that we'll be needing for this, and this is basically the starting point for our application. As you can see, this one, it's done right here. As you can see, we've been able to compile all of the assets that we would need. We've done everything, and the remaining thing right here is to just go into cd blog, and Laravel is telling you to use the new composer run dev script, which will basically run the development mode. But since this is Laravel, you can still use php artisan serve. Now the php artisan serve command would basically do the same thing like run or toggle on your development server, as you can see. So when you go over to a new tab and hit the address 172.0.0.1 or 8000, you'd be greeted with a Laravel page just like this. Now the new Laravel default boilerplate looks a lot more better than the previous one. This looks clean, and also it adds a little bit of things like a login page if you want that. It adds a sign up page if you want that. It also adds like a forgot password page also if you want that. So as you can see, we do have all of this within, and we'll be making use of these pages, customizing them a little bit, and actually making this a blogging application. So if you're ready, let's get started. So moving ahead would be starting the Laravel blogging application. As you can see, we do have this login and the register page, and then our Laravel boilerplate. So the next thing we simply want to do is to start off with the admin template. Yeah, starting off with the admin template gives us a good head start on how we can actually define the pages and how we can use these pages to work with what we want. So within this, we simply want to go back to the terminal. Would cancel out of the terminal, and then would open up the whole project in VS Code. A simple command you can type like this would be code dot, and if you don't have VS Code, you simply want to download VS Code, obviously. So go over, search for VS Code, and it's going to bring you to this page. Click on the first link you'd see pretty much on Google or Brave or any search engine that you do use, and download the respective version for your operating system. Like I said before, I use a Linux machine, so this is what you can see right here. We have the Debian and the RPM for Fedora and all other ones. So this works, and once you're able to download it for Mac or Windows and get it up and running, you should be able to go into any terminal and do the code period inside of the terminal, and this would basically launch VS Code for you. As you can see, we have code starting up right there, and in here we can simply make use of this terminal. What I like doing when working with Laravel is that I like using two different terminals. So I'm basically going to run PHP artisan serve on this terminal, and in the next one I'm going to run the other scripts that I might need. So let's say for instance I need to create a model or create something. I'll be using this terminal for that, and I'm using this just to run my scripts. Now right here, as you can see, we have VS Code installed, and I just want to make this a little bit easier to read. So I'm basically going to put this in a different workspace, and as well put this in a different workspace, and also the terminal in a different workspace, leaving out OBS, which I use for streaming and every other thing in this workspace. Now in here, I simply want to go over to VS Code, and as you can see, VS Code gives us all of the project files that we've created and basically everything in that form. Now, one of the things about Laravel, if you don't know, is that it is a PHP framework, like I've said before, and it does have a lot of things in there. Now, I'm not going to go in ahead and do every single thing on PHP because that is a totally different video, but I'm going to, however, explain most of the basic things that you might need to know about Laravel. Now, Laravel PHP is a framework for building full stack applications. So you can build the back end and the front end using Laravel PHP. And with Laravel, you do have the ability to do things like migrations, manage things, and then you have access to something called a model, an ORM. So an ORM stands for an object relational mapper, which it's mostly used for things like accessing your database, writing queries, running queries. Each and every one of these have their basic use, and I'm going to show you how to use Laravel's own ORM to run most of these things. Now, Laravel inbuilt ORM is called Eloquent, which has been there for a while, I think since the first version of Laravel, obviously. So it has a lot of features that you don't normally see in other different ORMs like Prisma or Drizzle, or the ones used in other programming languages like GORM, which is for the Go programming language. So in this case, I simply want to explain to you what most of these folders would do and how you can basically use these folders and configure things within Laravel PHP. So now, in here, we can see that we have a bunch of folders. Now, a whole lot of folders, and we simply have the first one called the app folder. We do have the public folder, which is an important place I'll talk about later on. We still have the resources folder, we have the routes, we do have the storage folder and the test folder. Now, these are different folders, and each one of them have their different things that it can do and different things that you can use them for. But I'm going to talk about the most important folders and the ones that you should watch out for. Now, the app folder holds most of your default configurations and things like routes, controllers, and everything. This is basically where Laravel is going to create most of those folders in. Now, the app folder in this case, take it like the parent folder for everything. Every single thing has to go through the app folder. So when you create a new schema, it stays in the app folder. you create a new controller, which I'll talk about later on, it stays there. So most of the logic for your backend application would most of the time stay in the app folder. So it's just a folder for logic. I don't know if you understand me. Now the next one on the list would be surely the config folder. Now the config folder is basically where Laravel does most of the configuration, like tell Laravel what database you want to use, how do you plan to cache things, how do you plan to do with the file system, and every other thing. It all goes in there. Like when you queue things, maybe you want things to run at a specific time, it's all in there. And also what you normally use for your sessions. When you log in, there's something called a session, and this is where you basically configure every of those things within the config folder. Now inside of this, we do have the database folders. The database folder holds mostly two things. It holds your migration and the factories. Now migrations are basically how you define your tables to be, and the factories are just used to fill up the table with some test data. So let's say for instance I want to fill up my table with 100 users. I can use the factories to create 100 users that would fill up my tables. And then also there's something called a seeder within it. Now this seeder basically is there to help you fill the table. So you define your users within the factory, you define how the table is going to be like in the migrations, and then you do use the seeder to actually seed those tables. So the seeder looks at the factories and the factories fills up the tables. That's basically how it is. Now the next part of this would be the node modules folder. Obviously the node modules, I'm sure as a developer you might have seen this. It's a part of Node.js, which just gives you a couple of tools and packages that you can work with. Laravel uses node modules also because it has things like React, which is basically built on Node. It has things like some other packages like Tailwind CSS, Vite, which is used for compiling all of this, which always comes from node modules. So you surely need that. The public folder is one good folder where you can put anything you want to show on the outside. So let's say for instance your images, your custom JavaScript, your CSS styles, if you do plan to use normal CSS, all of those stuff would be within the build folder, or sorry, the public folder. Now also when you build out the project, it is basically going to compile any Tailwind CSS. Probably if you do use Bootstrap, it is going to compile that and put it in the build folder for you. Now you don't need to worry much about this. It has a little to no use, but it's good that it's there. The resources folder is one more thing that you need to look out for. The resources folder holds many things like your custom scripts. So let's say for instance you do have Node.js, React within your project, just like we have. These are going to stay within the resources folder. Things like custom CSS files are going to be there, and yeah, most of the things you'd need would be in this folder right here. Now the views folder within this is for places like your templates. Laravel is a backend framework, so most backend frameworks, if they want to be full stack, would surely use a template engine to render data. For Laravel, it's called Blade. It's the default one, and I don't think you can change it. For something like Express, which is JavaScript, you do have a bunch of them. You do have EJS, you do have Blade also for JavaScript, you do have Jade, you do have Pug for JavaScript also. And for something like, let's say Django, which is a Python framework, you do have something called Ginger, and then also you have the normal Django template engine also, which is just the pure HTML. Now that is it for most of these template languages. The routes folder within this allows you to do some configurations and define routes. So basically you come in here to define routes. The routes you define within the routes folder are going to show up on the page. So let's say for instance, you can see that when we visit the home page, you do see this. When we visit the login page, you do see a login page. All of those things are defined within the routes folder, and specifically they are defined in the web.php. So right in here you can see that the default Laravel has this route for the home page. Anytime you see a slash in pretty much any programming language, especially when it comes to things about routes, it is always going to be the home page. So the slash is always the home page, the default page, the index page, anytime you see that. Now it simply says that when we try to get this home page, it is going to trigger a function. This function is going to run an initial command, which is basically how it can render React on the front end. So that is how it works. And moving on will be the template name. So it's going to render the welcome template there. And then there's also the one for middlewares, which it has created in this place. These are things like dashboards and so on. So most of these are the templates and the routes that Laravel would give you access to, as you can see right here. Now within this also there's a storage folder which is mostly for things like uploads and file uploads within. There's also a test folder which I'll talk about later when you try to run tests within your Laravel application, just to troubleshoot and see things that are not working well, or probably test the optimization and the performance of certain functions or features. And then there's a vendor folder which just works like the node modules folder. It's basically a folder where you can get resources, packages for PHP. Okay, so mostly if you do use Composer, it's going to save most of those things in the vendor folder. And as well, there are just a bunch of files right in here which I don't think you need to worry about. Now within this, you can see that we do have the basic things that we need. The good thing we can do right here is to make use of these things. So we can make use of the login pages which it has provided. We can make use of the sign-in pages which it has provided. And also we can do most of the things like the home page and work with it that way. But the first thing would be to clear out every of the things that we don't need. Now clearing out most of the things that we don't need, it's easy. For this, since we already know that this is going to be within our routes pages within the web.php page, you can see that it has this route right here. Now this route simply talks about the home route, and if you should comment this out and probably save your file, going back here and giving it a good refresh would greet you with a 404 page, meaning it cannot find that particular route. So since we know that it cannot find that particular route, we can basically work with that. Now take note that inertia, anyhow you pronounce it, it's basically a package that helps you render React application within Laravel. So as you can see, we have this. And in order to understand the full idea of what this is all about, we need to go to resources, go to JS, and in here you can see that we do have a bunch of things just like a React application. We do have this stuff called SSR, which it's mostly allows the React to render on the server side a little bit and then also push the remaining parts to the front end. Now you don't need to worry most about all of this, you just need to keep it that way. But the main thing you need to understand is the pages file right here, or the pages folder. Now the pages folder right here simply allows you to create more and more pages and define them within your Laravel route. So as you can see, this welcome page that is being rendered is actually within the pages folder, and you can go over to welcome.tsx, and yes, it uses TypeScript also. Now as you can see, within Laravel or within React, Laravel has provided something like this hook right here, the use page hook. And the use page hook gives you things like the head access, the link, which you can use to link files, and then also it gives you things like the use page, which you can use to access most of the things that you can be able to access within Laravel. So things like auth is going to be in there, and some other things also which you need, like the name, the quote, the Ziggy, sidebar, and all of that would be within this hook right here. So you can see it comes in from inertia React, so most of those things are there already. And from the shared data right here, you can see that it has all of these things defined within here. You can actually extend this if you want. As you can see, you can extend if you want. Now within this, you have the basic page and you have your welcome page where you do see all of those things in the first place. So let's say for instance, I want to change login right here to sign in. All I'll need to do is come to the welcome.tsx file and change the login to sign in. Now once I change the login to sign in, I'll need to give this a save, and if I should refresh here, you are going to see that okay, now it basically doesn't give us what we want, and the major reason is because we already compiled React so that it just works out of the back. Remember while we were installing dependencies, it asked us if we want to run npm run build, which we did say yes to. So once we need to do this, or when we need to change or make changes to our Laravel application, we basically need to run the whole script back again. So we need to say npm run dev. This is going to start up the development server for us and make sure that anything we do compile or do run, it's going to run well. So as you can see, it'll take a little bit of time, but once it's done loading, you should be able to see that it says sign in here instead of register. So that's how you can work with React, and I'm sure you know this by now. React has a lot of things that it has.